Hello. It's another episode of Write Once, Read Many. This time, chapter 27.4. Or Arc 27, chapter 4. Alright. Well, hopefully someone will be here for the chat, but if not, we'll just carry on. So, the audience participation question, not very creatively, was, what sad thing was Tattletale about to say? I'm sorry, Taylor. Tattletale said, I wish... Anyway, I'll let the song finish before I move too far along. But we can observe this beautiful drawing. It's Glastigwenye and Phoenix Feather in the moment that Taylor walks over to the pair of them. Looks like that speed draw is just about to finish up, so we can see the final version. Boom. Alright. So for themes, I put identity. Obviously, Taylor spends a lot of time thinking about her self-image and seeing Glastigwenye's sort of shadow shade makes her conscious of the fact that there's something of her that will be left behind, especially if Glastigwenye like harvests her soul, or however you want to put it. It's like harvesting the built-up data from the connection to the power. But, you know. So that gets her thinking. And then, I put roles and cycles. This one's like almost so on the nose I didn't put it, but like, yeah, they just talk about the powers and how all the different powers have, in Glastigwenye's terms, like done work and played different parts, but describing the very sci-fi concept of like the other entities' powers getting destroyed and scattered up and sent to the wrong people with cauldron vials. Then the way Glastigwenye says it is that that Eidolon came in at the wrong time. Is it the wrong time with the wrong costume or something like that? Let me see here. Yeah, but he's wearing the wrong costume and he's arrived at the wrong time. So this whole roles thing and like the difference between this and previous cycles. And let's see here. And then my last theme was emotional compartmentalization. Because of the part where Taylor, like, it's implicit that a lot of these people are like emotionally compartmentalizing, and they're really like keeping it together despite a lot of under the surface tension. But Taylor specifically like thinks to herself at one point that she can't fully just be herself. She has to be some in-between cape version of herself so that she doesn't like emotionally lose control about Gru being in danger, more or less. So she does specifically cut herself off from her own emotions there. Yeah, so those are the themes I thought stood out most. See here. Alright, given that they, just starting in on the chapter, given that they brought the last people through from the birdcage, they're now sending everyone who isn't participating in the first attack away. And after Chevalier announces it's time for them to go, they start calling out portals for which Earth and which location that they want. And we hear like 3 little examples of people calling things out. And then it gets sort of hand-waved to like lots of people are calling out lots of locations, etc. And then, Taylor can sort of tell by crowd dynamics right away which people are going to leave and which are going to stay. And then by like individual body language as well. And a whole bunch of people leave. New Wave along with Amy. No. Amy doesn't leave. She just sort of meets up with them for a second. New Wave and Rachel leaves. Imp leaves. They'll talk about it later, but obviously neither Rachel nor Imp will be like useful in this battle in a way that doesn't just immediately get them killed. Their powers don't synergize with this kind of grand offensive. Taylor asks in her own mind, had they retired, given up on fighting? And then puts out the most likely, or is this simply a fight on a scale they weren't prepared to participate in? I think kind of none of those. It's their Brandish, Lady Photon, and Flashbang, their powers aren't going to be useful for this style of cape work, just like Rachel and Imp, so they're bailing. Although I guess maybe Brandish could hurt Scion. Unlikely. Incredibly unlikely. But it's always a possibility with weird powers. Electro thing. But yeah, when Rachel and Aisha are about to leave, then Brian is about to leave too. He's saying that like Cozen's going, but then Taylor convinces him not to go. She even kind of says like I don't think she meant it meanly, but it's like a compliment if you come, insult if you leave kind of thing that she says. She says, you're not useless. I get if you don't have the courage, but your power, there's potential. Even if it doesn't work, that tells us a lot. And then he folds his arms and says, if you say so. And then when she nods her head, then he agrees to be in on the offensive. And Perian leaves as well, but Foil stays for the fight. And then Sophia is leaving as well. Let's see here. Yeah. Taylor sends a message through with bugs to Sophia that I'll talk to you later, is what she says. And I know it's italicized because bugs, but it also seems italicized because Taylor's being, she's tailoring. I'm watching you, Sophia. Anyway, so Chevalier gives it 45 minutes until they do their attack, and they all have Defiant and Tattletale doing comms, but they have access to the portals via the Doormaker and the Clairvoyant, the Cauldron resources. And then Taylor doesn't want to distract Tattletale, Defiant, or Chevalier, really, so we kind of watch some conversations here, but she's not like, she feels like she has nothing to do. She's hanging back. Apparently Scion he's alternating between big attacks and these like experimentation cycles, and they're in a lull right now, so they want to attack him before he does his next big attack. And then they're saying they're kind of trying to test the waters with this. They're bringing a lot of big guns, but they're just like looking for data they can use for future encounters, I guess. So they know going in that this is not like this is not the real fight, the final fight, whatever. And they all head to different locations, except Taylor doesn't know where to go. And then String Theory gets sent to her old stuff. Apparently her and Labrat have been thinking so hard with their big brains in Big Jail that they can bring together some sort of tinker devices that will help them within 45 minutes. And then String Theory needs a specific time of the attack so that she can set the device beforehand. And at first she's given a time, and they go, you really think you'll hold out for 8 minutes after the initial offensive? And then they reduce the amount of minutes by 4 minutes. So Defiant thinks they'll hold out for 4 minutes. And then she starts making demands. She needs a fusion reactor or a large source of plasma. And then she's sent to go talk to Tattletale. And then Labrat, out of earshot of most of the people, is sent to an animal shelter to go harvest biomaterials. Very, frowned upon activity. Labrat's not like, he's not winning an award for being the nicest guy here. He's a terrible person who is bringing ominous devices to bear. And that's fine. Character-wise, we love a character like this. They're working with highly questionable people. Because desperate times call for desperate measures, all that. Then, oops. Just checking on stream since it kept crashing previous times, and I'm not sure the best way to make sure it stays up, but we'll do our best. Let's see here. So Bonesaw is told that she's going to be working on people with Panacea watching over her. But she is also told that the alternate dimension with the cloning vats was destroyed. She's really surprised by this. She's like, my lab, the alternate dimension, the cloning vats. And then, I don't know if she didn't know about, like, Jack's gambit to reuse the clones. She must have, right? Because she made those. But, like, knowing that, she thought that they just left them, I guess. Maybe she didn't think of the way that Defiant could collapse the dimension, but it seemed kind of like, I don't know. At least narratively, it seems straightforward that he could use like this artificial pocket dimension that was created with Dodge's technology would be something that you could just make no exit for and like collapse, and then it would all be gone. I don't know. Maybe she thought a bunch of them did get left behind to dispose of the crawlers or whatever and go through the moral hazard of killing all the babies one by one. But you know, Bonesaw's crazy, I guess. So why am I questioning so much? It just seems like her cutthroat attitude would lead to her knowing they would collapse the dimension. Anyway, I'm getting too caught up on that. So, Panacea has stayed, and she's there with Marquis, and then there's, like, some random people. Oh, and Taylor feels it's unfair that Amy gets to be with her dad and such, and that she doesn't get to. She acknowledges that it's not that it's like Amy doesn't deserve this. It's just that she wants it. So she's able to step outside herself and see that this is not like a logical thought process. She's just upset about Danny being dead, but just doesn't think about it in those terms. Anyway, yeah, so she notices, like, there's Acid Bath is just sitting in the sun and kind of having a nice time just being there, with his shirt off, I guess. And then seeing Glastigüeñe, she walks over, and the scene that you see here on the image of Glastigüeñe standing in front of a shade who's kneeling down and holding up fire to keep her warm, that is what Taylor walks up upon, and then she isn't sure how to deal with this situation at first. She feels like kind of gross if she doesn't, like if she just goes along entirely with the way that Glastigüeñe is using this other cape's soul as like a completely subservient, like, hand warmer thing. She thinks about it in terms that Golem had put it. Golem has left a big impact on her. She keeps thinking throughout all these chapters, like, what will Golem do? And here it says, someone who'd had a life, a mother, a father, family. He'd had dreams, had undergone a trigger event, or paid a small fortune for powers in a jar. He'd had a story. And then Taylor's trying to be maximally polite to Glastigüeñe, but even if it is sort of out of protocol, like social protocol, she says hello to the spirit and then asks, when it can't speak back, she asks, did you have a name? And then Glastigüeñe says Phoenix Feather. And then Taylor thanks Phoenix Feather as she warms her hands. And then sort of is contemplating the future. I felt a bit of a chill at that. What if I fell in battle? Would she claim me? Would I become like that? What form would that body take? Skitter, Weaver, or a blending of the two? And then Glastigüeñe, observes that she's not armed for battle yet, and Glastigüeñe starts going, "Oh yeah, it's tough being at the top. You know how it is." She says, "The head that wears the crown bears a heavy burden," which I only ever say sarcastically because I think it's a really funny thing to say. But Glastigüeñe just straight up says it. It rules. Anyway. You view us both as queens, Fairy Queen? I do. And then she says to drop the titles, so Taylor starts calling her Glastigüeñe. And then she's still calling her administrator. And they talk about different roles that Glastigüeñe is attributing: the champion, the high priest, the observer, the shaper, the domain keeper. And we can assume who some of these are. The champion might be like Chevalier, maybe. The high priest is Eidolon. The observer, I think, is the clairvoyant. The shaper, I'm not 100% sure, but I think the domain keeper is Labyrinth. If not, then the shaper is Labyrinth, and I have no idea who the domain keeper is. But anyway, not to get too bogged down in the details, I just think that this part with Glastigüeñe is really interesting. And then Taylor admits she's trying to make sense of this all. She doesn't have a grasp on it. And she's concerned that Glastigüeñe might want to work with Scion, and she's trying to broach the subject, and then Glastigüeñe says that they all have their parts to play, and that basically the powers that have connected to the humans, she says, we wear our human faces and harbor our dramas and fantasies, but at the same time, individuals playing the parts. As the play starts anew on a different stage with different faces and forms, if it all goes well, a figure from the crowd joins the stage for the plays that follow, and the roles are refined. So she's like describing the like sci-fi plot in like fully fantasy terms, and it's like really good. It serves as a good metaphor, I think, if, I don't know, maybe somebody had a harder time following the previous stuff, or like they didn't really understand because some people like speed through this and don't really pick up on all the details, then maybe this would help them clarify what all had gone on in the Scion cycles chapter. Especially for people who are like bananas and don't like the interludes, and they're like, I'm just gonna skim these, I'm not really gonna read it. Crazy take, but I've heard that kind of thing. Yeah, so she brings up the, the roles, the kings and queens, and then how some parts are larger or smaller, and Glastigüenier describes that she has the role to keep the company of the dead, and Glastigüenier says the other nobles their tasks are more immediate, shorter in term. So perhaps she sees them as fighting this fight and herself as waiting everything out until the end. And it says the champion and the observer ensure this next act goes on without a hitch, and I think that's I think that is pretty clearly, to me, Chevalier and the clairvoyant plus doormaker combo. Although, you know what? I guess the observer could be something else. I don't know. And then she says that the Shaper and the Domain Keeper clean up after we're all done here, one way or another. So it goes. When Taylor asks about the priest, then Glastigüenier says, the High Priest! Which I find, it's a funny moment. And then, she thinks Taylor already knows. And then, also, Taylor mentions Contessa, and maybe Contessa would be the observer. She's observing future paths, or I don't know. Hard for me to say. But she compares Contessa, Glastigüenier, Panacea, Labyrinth. I bet Panacea is the Shaper. And then Taylor's confused why she's on the list with the other people who are considered these high roles. And it's obvious. She's called the Administrator. It's not because she eats people with bugs. It's because of the way she coordinates other capes. And because of the way, she moves around a battlefield. Like if you think of that Echidna fight, I feel like that's one of the ultimate examples of, she's pointing out to other capes physically with stuff they can read, and, big arrows, and, distance lines. These are where all your targets are. This is where different types of people need to move in, because, she's naming what capes are where, and what, in that fight, what clones are where, and where Echidna's running around to. And, clearly, she's built this giant organization with, by bringing people like Moksho into the wards, as well as, getting a bunch of villains to be teamed up with them, having the Undersiders no longer be under, as much scrutiny. So I think that she's clearly doing the thing where she can't see herself the way other people see her, but, her accomplishments are quite large in the administration field. Anyway, So, not wanting to ask too direct questions, Taylor's saying things like, "I'm not sure I follow," and then Glastigüeñe is trying to describe the situation with the Cauldron Capes and the second entity, saying, "We have two courts, but the other court arrived to the stage bedraggled, maddened, and they don't have any instructions or forewarning. You understand?" Yeah, that's clearly the misapplication of who got what powers, and the fact that they didn't get distributed like the cycle normally happens. And then this is when they say the thing I sort of quoted at the top of the stream. The High Priest is in similar straits to these unfortunates. He stands straight and bluffs through his lines, but he's wearing the wrong costume, and he's arrived at the wrong time, just like the others. And then Taylor tries to ask what Scion thinks of this, saying, "What does he think of this?" And Glastigüeñe doesn't know. But sort of describes the position that the sort of human, more like narrative-driven half of Scion is in, saying, "He set this in motion, and there's no finale. There's no promise of another play after this one is done. The nobles of our court's mighty fairy may have no role to play." So I think that this is a really important moment, because later on, when Taylor is crafting her final idea for how to deal with Scion, it sort of revolves around this idea, and they'll talk about it at various points, but it revolves around this idea that Scion is aimless and has kind of no hope for the future. And when Taylor asks if she's concerned, it says she smiled a little but didn't respond. And in my opinion, that's like, yes, she is concerned. And then Taylor asks that if it looks like they might win, will Glastigüeñe join Scion's side? And then we get a description of the sort of horizon, which is still a red sky sunrise with atmospheric problems from all the explosions and dust. And then Glastigüeñe says that although she'd like to see the next play, etc., she will continue to carry out her role. So it doesn't really... She doesn't really come down on one side or the other, the way that I can tell, or that Taylor can tell, the way that she's describing this. Maybe she feels like she's saying something more definitive, but since we can't infer her role as well as she would like to imply her role toward us, then we're left wondering if maybe she's going to turn on them and help Scion. And then Taylor thinks maybe she just didn't want me to understand. But she's sort of just back and forthing. She's not sure. And then she looks at the specter of Phoenix Feather and thinks that she's gonna watch Glastigüenye. And then she's like, ugh, I have to keep tabs on so many different people. And then she kind of asks a more direct question, asking what Scion is within this whole metaphor, and says, like, Taylor asks, he's the director? And then she says, the audience as well. The metaphor falls apart at this. He's our father, our child, our creator, and now our destroyer. And then she asks about Dr. Mother, and then Glastigüenye basically says anyone without powers is a prop. And then she's like, but she's so influential and she's so consequential. And then she's like, yeah, but think about the Holy Grail. Wasn't the Holy Grail pretty influential in the story of the Knights of the Round Table? And then Taylor says she understands what Glastig is trying to say. Well, for a moment. But Taylor says that what she says is, I'm not quite so distanced from this as you. Not so willing to be actor rather than the act. And I think that's a good way to get across the fact that she's more tied to her human side than her fairy side. And so she says she's not able to connect all the dots. Sorry, I misstated earlier. She's not saying that she followed. It was instead Glastigüenye saying that she followed what Taylor was saying. I can't even keep my own notes straight at all. Anyway, so then asking to go further into detail, then Glastigüenye says she can't because the Cauldron people are listening. And then that makes Taylor think that the doctor has cards up her sleeve. And then Glastigüenye sends Taylor away to get ready for battle. And then Taylor asks about her role in this battle, and then Glastigüenye gets up on her face and is like holding like hand to side of face. And Taylor's like, oh my god, she's gonna pull my soul out. And then she says that she's already told Taylor and she doesn't like to repeat herself. And then she has Taylor bend down and she gives Taylor a kiss on the cheek and says that she's looking forward to collecting her later. And implies that they'll be able to communicate once they're both in the sort of powers afterlife. And then Phoenix Feather says, or she asks about Phoenix Feather. They can talk, but then she's like, no, but we can discuss. They can do the shard communication. They can be like, agreement. They can set destinations. And then Glastigüenye kind of apologizes to her. And Taylor goes, "My loss?" She knows. And then we get to see her, like, absorb Phoenix Feather, like, just zorp him into her hand. And then sort of immediately send out two other Spectre-like figures. One of them seemed to have either been a Case 53 or surgically altered to be, like, centaur-like, in some fashion. It says 4 legs, with 2 arms, different length. And then Taylor finally leaves, going to the Chicago Protectorate. We keep getting scenes set of different weather. It says there was strong wind, heavy clouds of moisture, and dust were soaring across the sky. And the city's empty. People have all tried to flee through all the nearest portals. And then Taylor reaches out for the bugs. You know, those bugs. Oops. And then she wonders again about her form if Glastigüeñe were to take her, if she'd have like her equipment, or if she'd have like specific armor colors, or if she would have like the clawed fingertips of the old costume. And then she thinks about how, like, there were some things they could do against Behemoth, like some things she could pull up, but that almost all of her tricks are meaningless against Scion. All of the weapons she could possibly bring are meaningless against him. And she decides on like a basically Skitter style costume. And then she has the white lenses and white armor panels on top of the black bodysuit. So it's actually a combination we've never seen before. But she kind of is like the color scheme of, I think of like the Samus light suit in Metroid Prime 2, where all the undertones are black and all of the outermost facing armor is white. Although I think for Taylor, her like full armor panels are a lot less coverage. They're kind of like standard body armor zones. And then she, brings the gun with her, thinking of killing Coil. And then she brings a taser. And then she brings her flight pack, of course. And then she brings her pepper spray canister as a symbolic gesture. And then says, "Door to the battlefield." And then we have a page break all-timer where it brings us to the drilling platform. They're on an oil platform above the ocean. And they don't say it in this moment, but like on a totally different Earth, so that they're further than just distance away from the Scion body. And then she thinks about how everyone there was wearing spider silk, and how before, like, while it might have been helpful, it basically doesn't matter given the enemy's level of lethality. And then she thinks that there's 80 people who were there for this first wave offensive, and they left behind anyone who couldn't contribute to the fight or like meaningfully coordinate. like Taylor's just there for coordination and to be like a hands-on person for Tattletale and Defiant. This is when she thinks through why Rachel and Aisha aren't there, because their powers won't meaningfully contribute to the battle and they'd just be in danger. Lab Rat is there handing out little armband things. It's the armbands for communication, and then also these little weird matchbox with straps that are like a different armband. And then he looks at Taylor, and then stops, fishes out a separate box, because he seemingly had been handing them out randomly, but then sees that Taylor's a bug, and then hands her a different one than the one he had picked before. She asks what the box is. Lab Rat won't say. He just says, "My work." And then he says, "You don't want me to answer your question. Wear it or don't. I'm wearing it." Clock Blocker basically says that's... Greg's here and says, "What's in the box?" Clock Blocker has like another final Clock Blocker funny moment here, where he's saying that he doesn't think it's a good recommendation because that guy's crazy, and then explains that the only reason that Lab Rat got caught was because he turned into a weird 2-story high photosynthetic form, and then despite saying this, then Taylor looks over and Clock Blocker's wearing the dubious "what's in the box" that he was given, and then he's like, "I will do anything that gives me any extra chance, no matter what." And then this just says, in like the most Katara coded line of all time, "Maybe that's all this is. Hope." And now I'm tear bending. Taylor starts marking everyone there with bugs. Classic Taylor. Galvanate is galvanating the shit out of a bunch of people. They're all becoming defensive metal people. The way that Taylor phrases it is layering invincibility over invincibility for Alexandria, for Gavel, Gentle Giant, and a birdcage cape I didn't recognize. One of their many plans to see if they can outdo the offensive capability of Scion. And then they had apparently already tested Gru taking Galvanate's power to further galvanate people. But Gru was testing powers before Taylor arrived, and apparently that doesn't work. All the backline capes, like, it says that Bonesaw and Panacea were both absent. Taylor says somehow ominous, but it's like, would you want them here? Now? There's 3 minutes until they are going to leave, and apparently Glastigüeñe has gone from standing child mode to flying psychic demon child mode, and has a swirling cloak below her, like completely obscuring where her legs would be, with a bunch of spirits walking on the platform. It goes back and forth between calling them like spirits and specters, so will I. And then Vista asks why they're on the ocean. Legend's like, "The planet's mostly water. You wouldn't get that, you land dwellers." And then Clock Blocker's like, "Hey, don't call me a land dweller." And then Legend's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply that you are a lowly land dweller." And then Taylor thinks about Legend's sort of fall from grace, and apparently he looks 10 years older than he had at the story start. And then Taylor's like, talking about rooftops and how she can't trust them because her first fight was on a rooftop, etc. And then Chevalier starts talking, explaining that they're trying to have them as far from Scion as possible to avoid him tracking them there. And he says that when he says that Cauldron can't make portals there, someone asks from the crowd, can't or won't? And then I really like this, because Chevalier just says, it doesn't matter, and then moves on. Because in this moment, that super doesn't matter. And then he explains that this is supposed to be a test. They're not going all out yet. But they're looking for anything that works to try and connect the dots and find powers that are suitable. And then, Tattletale's over the comms as expected, and so is Defiant. And I really like this Defiant line. He says, take our cues, don't hesitate. And that's the only thing he says. And I mean, I'm assuming that's to everyone, but it could just be to Taylor. I don't know. And then Tattletale starts talking to Taylor specifically. And so the Chevalier speech is cut off. And Tattletale says that the reason that Taylor's in the field is to be Tattletale's liaison. Taylor at this point puts on the dubious lab rat technology and then the armband, and when it asks for her ID, which it has done throughout the story at different points, this third time she says her name is Taylor. It was Skitter, then Weaver, then Taylor. And she confirms the name. And then she sees an image of a sort of circular clock face style thing, and instead of 12 numbers, there's like 14. And then this is because they have 14 different attack groups ready to do different attempts to see what's going to work. And they'll open doors at different points. They actually switch where string theory is in the order so that it fits the timing window better. And then Chevalier and Ingenue, whatever was being said, the last word of the last thing that Tattletale says is, Chevalier likes his speeches an awful lot for someone who doesn't like speeches. And then Chevalier, in a comedy beat, just yells, doors! Chevalier finished. And then all their portals open up. Ingenue goes up to Chevalier, who is the first attack wave. And then they're like several miles away from Scion and hoping that he's not going to notice them that far away. They're 4 miles away. And then because the portal is near enough to Taylor, her power extends through portals like fully, which is good information to have. And then, so she's sensing what's on the other side of the portal. And then Ingenue is stacking her power exchange thing onto Chevalier. She is most likely giving him more range and more power at a like total loss of control. And this doesn't seem to have worked because like his weapon sort of bursts, and like it's when he tries to fire the weapon, it sort of all falls apart. And then I mean, maybe it worked to fire one shot, but then Defiant sends the second group out. It's the speedster Chuckles, the demon clown himself, holding up Clock Blocker and Gentle Giant and these other people, and like assumedly just carrying all of them and physically hauling them along with him with his super speed so that they can run up and use close range like touch powers on Scion. It's a cool idea. And then Taylor can feel the rumbles of the detonations of the different like fighting, despite the portals being miles away from each other at like near equal intensity. So he's really just like completely destroying the land at huge scale. And then apparently the third wave of people includes like the Pretender Alexandria, Eidolon, and Legend with Glass de Guenye. So it's like the big three becomes the big four. And then you know, Eidolon reports he's running, and then this is when Taylor says, "Tattletale, do me a favor," and then we get the "anything for you, sweetie." But she says to let the others know who are with Glass de Guenye that she might turn on them. That she's not sure of her loyalties. And then Taylor focuses on the other world again. She closes her eyes to just be in her bugs and see through them. And because Scion's so bright, she can see through the bugs fairly well to just see where he is. And then she's able to see that, like, a bunch of crazy battle stuff is happening. Eidolon's teleporting around. Alexandria is being, like, thrown around with lasers. Legend is doing a big laser push, and it's just not working at all. He just doubles and triples down on it. They send through the fourth group, which has Gru and then Shuffle and a bunch of other capes we don't know about. And then what they do is they use Shuffle's power to shuffle out a piece of air with Gru's darkness above Scion, so it floats down and drifts over him. I feel like that's a really smart plan. Like, normally you're like, how do you get Gru in there good enough to, like, use his power? But, like, that's really smart. And then sadly, it does not work. When Gru fires a laser, it is of the Legend variety. But I do feel like stealing Scion's powers, possibly weakening his defensive powers, and destroying him with his own ultra offensive powers, like, it's a pretty good proposition. Although sadly his defensive powers outweigh the ability to power thief. And then they pull back Gru and a bunch of everybody else. Apparently Chevalier totally left his cannon blade and is just vaulting through a portal with Ingenue, who's all burned and stuff. And then they clear everyone out through the portals, and it's String Theory's attack now. Tattletale gives the order to clear out multiple times. She repeats herself because this is gonna be one large scale attack. Clock Blocker is in a small group from his set who returned. Apparently they were not even in the direction that was being fired, and they still lost all but Clock Blocker, Chuckles, and then like one other. And then Gru and Shuffle make it back fine. they start asking. There's a comedy moment here where String Theory's like, "You put the portal on the wrong end of the device," which you've got to imagine if it went off, that would have been quite bad. The number man is calculating with String Theory real quick, and then she's yelling that she needs a view. They say it's too dangerous, and then she just yells that she'll make it fuck up on purpose if they don't give her a view. And then they get one, and it's kind of weird. It says that it's a landscape torn to shreds by Scion's attacks, grassy fields with steep hills, a fence in the distance. I was just thinking, like, how could a fence survive all the shaking and quaking? But I guess it's one hell of a fence. Anyway, and then she says it's more like a bug zapper, but it hits Scion really, really hard, and it says that he was punched out of the sky, and it doesn't like punch him into the ground. It punches him out of the atmosphere. Vista's asking what weapon that was. It's the G driver, which is her follow-up. Her previous weapon, the F driver, was able to knock the moon out of the orbit. And when I've got to assume Clockblocker asks why they didn't hear about this. It could be anyone really, but then Defiant just replies, morale. And so, yes, the G driver is used. The previous one was the Firmament driver, but this is the God driver. And then Tattletale reports he's coming back. They start to get the next group ready. It's a whole group of like Galvanate affected folks with like a Tonda person among them. Say heavy hits. But they don't know where he is anymore. They say he's gone. And they're checking everything they can, but as we've learned earlier in the book, electronic surveillance doesn't really work on him, so they have to like standard surveillance, I guess. So they have to like do the most to find him. But then Taylor senses him above them. She says, I felt my bug stir, not the wind, but I do feel like it's supposed to kind of be her cape sense more than anything. I looked up. Scion, here, directly above us, to the point he was barely a speck. And then she, thinks back on the first time she was near him, sensing his disgust that had nothing to do with any, facial movements or anything, just, her cape sense. And then she said now she sensed bloodlust. And it says it's like when she was in Lung's clutches and he was squeezing her to death. Then she whispers, Tattletale, he's here. No, can't be. We need an escape, now. Tattletale? They're saying no. Cauldron's saying no. And then Taylor starts arguing for them. They actually hurt him with string theory. And Tattletale explains he wasn't just on the opposite side of the planet. He was on a different Earth. And then Taylor's like, well, he's here now. And then somebody else from the birdcage, probably someone super in tune with their power, senses him above them as well. But they let out a gasp. And then there's an ominous glow out of him. And then Taylor thinks about if she was Skitter, she'd sacrifice herself. If she was Weaver, she'd make peace with the fact that she needed to die so Cauldron could preserve their portals. And then she says, I wasn't either, not at my core. and then she asks to Cauldron for them to come save them. Says that if she gets a vote, she's voting for them to save them, and not to let this many of their big guns die, etc. And then they don't say anything, and she says, he knows already. He has to. If he found us this easily, come on. And then, dramatic irony, we know from the Scion interlude at the end of Arc 26 that he traced the source of their portals when he was still trapped in the Grey Boy effect initially. So we know that what Taylor is saying is exactly right, and their overabundance of caution in the moments when they can't know things, their hesitation is part of what is getting the best of them. The Cauldron can't fully work with the others. They don't trust anything. And they're not willing to put anything at risk, even though everything's already at risk. Anyway. Yeah, more people notice, and everybody's looking up, and they're like, ah! And then, Taylor can't feel any portals opening with any of her bugs. She closes her eyes, and then I'm sorry, Taylor, Tattletale said. I wish. Her voice shorted out as the energy of Scion's attack cut out the communications. Oh my god. So I think for me, this chapter worked like perfectly. We got like the really intriguing conversation with Glastic-Gwenye, Taylor's decisions around like her self-image, how she's like even how she's dressed herself and like what she chose to bring with her. And then the ideas that they had to approach the fight. One thing they didn't think of is if they were one more portal step removed, like if they went to the oil platform, hear the Chevalier speech, all step to like 14 different locations on different Earths, which is still totally doable by Doormaker, and then they're stepping through. Maybe the comms wouldn't work well enough. I don't know. If there were just slightly more one more step of separation, then it might have made Scion's counteroffensive much less effective. But then again, who knows? Anyway, the chapter weaves in some fun moments with the Tinkers, and we get some clock blocker lines. We have the excitement of the fight itself. We know that it's just an opening thing, but the stakes feel so high, and it almost felt like anything could happen aside from like a victory on the hero's side, because we're like narratively too early for that. Then it felt like almost anything could happen in this battle. And we see some like cool powers combinations and ideas. I think having a speedster with super strength like physically move Clock Blocker up to your enemy so that he can attempt to use his power, pretty smart idea. It didn't work, but if they were fighting anyone but Scion, it would have worked. Let's see here. Oh yeah. The stakes felt super high, and it felt almost as if, I said that bit. Yeah. It was great. I really like this chapter. I think it's really incredible. I think the next chapter is even better, but that is not to diminish this chapter's significance. 27.5 can only stand so tall because it's standing atop the shoulders of 27.4. Anyway, as for arc stuff, yeah, it's a really exciting opening to the battle and to the climax of this particular arc. Seeing what they can do. Into the characters section, we have Chevalier and Ingenue. A bit ominous, given that Ingenue turns really good heroes into crazy murderers. And Chevalier is supposed to be like your traditional, very straightforward hero. So that's a bit of a... You know, Ingenue could change her cape name to Red Flag, probably. But Chevalier does his normal thing here, where he says he hates speeches, then does a speech. He does a really good job at like getting everyone where they need to be, and like sort of making those decisions both before they leave the initial location and after they arrive on the oil platform. And being the first attack, I think, is really important. So, like Taylor says, they want to make sure whoever does the first attack doesn't bail, because that just makes it more and more likely that no one goes. So Chevalier does it. He's the very first attack. Defiant, basically like doing what Dragon would be doing here. Being an interim dragon. He doesn't get that much characterization, but he gets a little, and it's like I said, I really like that line where he says, what is that? Yeah, take our cues, don't hesitate. Yeah. So I like that. We got Sophia. Sophia doesn't say anything, but she just bails when everybody who's the non-combatants leaves, and Taylor gets the last word, speaking through the portal with bugs. So you know, Sophia is just building up her little frustration meter. Oh, that Taylor, I hate her so much. Urgh. Talking to me with bugs. I wrote down a big Aisha, Rachel, Sarah, Carol, Mark, Cozen, various non-combatants. They all leave in short order. Not that much is said by or to any of these characters. I think Aisha and Rachel each get a single line. And, you know, this is the dividing moment where Brian stays. Put down Perian and Foil. They have one last hug as Perian leaves and Foil stays for the fight. The string theory lab rat dynamic is pretty good. It feels like these feel like characters that once Wildbow wrote them, he's like, damn, I wish I had just written a story about these two characters instead of everybody else. They feel like they're completely like the main, like they're like 2 of 5 main characters of another Wildbow work kind of thing. That's one of the magics of Wildbow, is like so many side characters feel like they could easily just be main characters of their own new story. String theory has meaningfully changed the direction of the battle, but it was a very short-lived victory. And then Labrat, we'll see. We'll see what happens with Labrat. I put Glastigwenya and Phoenix Feather. This acts as a good source for Taylor to have, her various introspective thoughts about the image she portrays outwardly, like what image has sort of stayed with her, the way she thinks of herself, what totems would stay behind as representations of like how she moved in the world. So it's like book-wise, it's like a self-reflection device. And by telling the fairy tale version, Taylor is able to learn much of what we know directly from like the most sci-fi chapter of them all, the Cyan Interlude. And she is able to have these concepts relayed to her. And even though they don't all kind of land, like even us, the audience, seeing these story concepts in another way, really, I think, it allows us to sort of reconceptualize what the sci-fi stuff is doing. Greg says, it's Bacano syndrome. Just about everybody is main character-ish. Yeah, definitely. There's so many main character-ish characters. I mean, Glastigüenye, the little girl, is clearly the little girl from the opening scene of Bacano, who is the assistant to the vice president of the Daily Days newspaper. Let's see here. So, bringing Eidolon into the picture, Glastigüenye's whole thing expresses the conflict that's currently going on. And, not only the fact that there's a cyclical nature, but that the cycle was already broken no matter what they do. And that in so doing the breaking of the cycle, a bunch of the people like Eidolon or the High Priest are not really like understanding their roles. So like her current goal is seemingly to get everyone to play their roles better. And she has already singled out the High Priest and has said that the second course is coming in confused. All these damn cauldron capes are ruining my plans, she says. So I wrote down Legend, and I think Legend's sort of bedraggled nature fits. He was the one who was sort of the most moral of the original triumvirate members from the beginning of the book, and because of that, everything has weighed on him more than it has the others. He was the least complicit, and yet feels the most guilty. I think that Legend is, faults in mind, I think that he is probably still one of like the top heroes, the most heroic individual people. And he just sort of, he's a fixture too, because he is really, really unkillable in a power sense. But, anyway, Amy and Marquis, neither of them are at the offensive, but both of them are here at the scene of the Glastigüenye image, where they're just having like a nice moment between a father and a daughter, and Taylor's like, you don't get to have that because that means I don't have it. Taylor's trauma response is to have like Jonah syndrome from Betrayal at House on the Hill. I want all the turns. I need all the father figures. And then, yeah, I don't have too much to say on the Amy Marquis dynamic. But Dennis the Menace, he's still having a funny moment about the possibility of hitting Scion with the knocks the moon out of orbit cannon, and how that would have given him some hope. But then it turns out it shouldn't have given him any hope, because that's like 1 second before Scion comes in. I am, as always, impressed with Dennis's bravery. Not that he was willing to get right next to Scion, but that he was willing to get right next to a clown. I mean, when you think about it, what's scarier than Scion? Any clown. So, it's kind of this is kind of one of those things where it's like, they should have considered maybe teaming up with Scion to take out that clown. But they didn't think of that. They didn't think this situation through. Anyway, Dennis, great guy. Glad he was here. Lisa gets like a final sad utterance to Taylor. I mean, I don't know if she's saying, I wish I had more time with you. I wish I had sent someone else. But yes, she's very like Lisa tense, where she's acting cool as a cucumber, but it's sort of obvious to Taylor. And then Brian, poor Brian, convinced to go on this expedition by Taylor. They had a really cool idea, shuffling in his power smoke above Scion, but it just was not it was not it in the end. He, like Taylor, just was he grit his teeth and went on the mission. Before he goes out the portal the first time towards Scion, he salutes Taylor, and that's when Taylor has to like distance herself from her emotions and say like, look, I wanted to be Taylor, but I couldn't be full Taylor here. I'd freak the fuck out. And she salutes him back, so they have that nice moment. And then Taylor, like, I really, I like that moment when Taylor decides, like that she's going to advocate on her own behalf, and that it's worth it for her to, like, stand up for her, not only herself, but everyone on the platform. Like, as much as we can always, like, sacrifice something and be like, it was a necessary sacrifice, on the other hand, it's like, but was it? Aren't you really just, like, fucking yourself up? So, I don't know, because, they can say all day, like, oh, he would get through the door, but it's like, he can clearly do that on his own. Anyway, for powers, knowledge, and world building, the whole Fairy Queen section, really, really cool. I think probably if you really like dig into it, you could figure out exactly who all the different roles are. I think she says astronomer, and I don't know. No, I'm just misremembering. I was trying to see what roles she mentions, but yeah. Anyway, so then aside from that, there was the Taylor bringing her self-image, pepper spray. It felt like when the adepts had their embellishments to enhance their powers, which probably just got their self-image more in line with their trigger event or whatever. And then once again, I thought Gru attempting to steal Scion's power was like actually like a smart idea, especially the way they went about it. I really liked seeing them trying all these powers combos again, like putting Clock Blocker into the hands of a speed clown. I never would have thought of that. In retrospect, I'm like, that's really obvious. You need to get him to where he's going. But like, yeah, you gotta come up with that first. Yeah, I thought all the little attacks were cool. The G driver was like especially cool to see, like, before you know that it hasn't fully worked. It's like, damn, it seems like it like kind of did a thing. And then I was wrong, it didn't do the thing. I really like the idea of the scene of the sunrise, being that first meeting place, and then this really like stark difference to each location, like Chicago, truly the Windy City because the environment is destroyed, then to like this clear ocean. Anyway, we can move on to audience participation, and then that was what was Tattletale about to say? And I think there could have been any number of serious answers. I think that she could have said, like, I wish I had deployed someone else. I wish I hadn't sent you. I wish we had more time. I wish we had kissed. Maybe. I wish we could open the portal. I wish there was something I could do. Saddletail. It's when you're sad and you're Tattletale. You become Saddletail. I guess thinking about this chapter, like, in a way, Tattletale is her, like, staking something on good faith is like staking Taylor's life almost by sending her to the battle, and Taylor's is like staking Gru's life. Like, none of this is explicit, but it feels like everyone's staking something beyond their own life almost. Greg says, I wish Imp hadn't told you that thing she said last chapter. Yeah. Boom. Oh man, remember when Imp said, I'm pregnant with Regent, I ate some of his hair? What a terrible day. And technically the same day, because that chapter was the same day. But I think I have a better question here this time, which is 27.5. Make up your own lab rat emergency box form and the emotion it is tied to. And I think, there could be some pretty good ones. I feel like anything's on the table. And it doesn't have to be super complex. It could be basic too. I'm in for whatever. I'm just hoping something funny gets created. I should start the redux of the speed draw and the music, and then all right. This song that we're hearing now, and that was at the top of the program, is Extinction by ScarlettXOX. You can find her work at twitch.tv/Scarlett_Rogue. Our Discord server link, as well as the other links, can be found in the stream description and channel description. The author of the work being discussed can be supported on Patreon at patreon.com/Wildbow. The full text of the work is available for free online at verahumans.wordpress.com. And there's also a fan-made audiobook of the entire work at audioworm.rain-online.org. By the way, as silly as it seems like it might be, I shan't be doing a separate chapter for the addendum. We'll just do it the same day on the same stream. Cheers, Greg. I see Greg is disappointed in the lack of addendum stream. If someone pitches me an idea for a something with slightly more substance, something that maybe was like a special episode where we talk about a thing, like that silly thing I did with the bank robbery, like if there was something like that, I would maybe do it, and that would be the addendum week. But it's all dependent on coming up with an idea.